Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mindset, Heartset, Reset, our dynamic live weekly show that provokes introspection, cultivates compassion, and sparks positive change. Through insightful discussions, practical tools, and authentic stories, this show nurtures empowering mindsets, open-hearted connections, and the courage to hit the reset button on our lives. The mission of our show is to expand love on a global scale with a vision to shift humanity's future into one in which all can thrive. I'm super excited to welcome you here if you're live, if you're welcome to welcome you here if you are coming from one of our other platforms, Facebook, YouTube, our Humanities team, private viewing room. Welcome, everybody. Super excited for our show together. This is going to be amazing. Hi, I'm Dr. Roshanak Hashimoon. I am a computational clinical and behavioral neuroscientist. My work is in optimization. I do consulting for individuals and businesses and help them get to better, really using science and emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. I create innovative strategies to help individuals and businesses become more purposeful and resourceful. And I'm just really excited to have my beautiful, amazing guest with me today, Dr. Nathalie Martinek. We are continuing our mental health series. You know, understanding mental health is so important for everyone because it encompasses our emotional, psychological, and social well-being, which of course is for ourselves, but we are all working and connecting to each other all day, every day. So it really affects how we are interacting with each other, and individually it affects how we handle stress and make our decisions, again, affecting ourselves and others. So it's really important for us to get that awareness of what's going on with mental health. And I'm excited to be talking about shame today as part of our mental health awareness series. Today's episode is Transforming Shame, Strategies for Personal Growth and Peace. And so in some way, shape, or form, shame has insidiously injected itself into each of our lives. It conceals itself, it's highly contagious, and it almost always compromises our happiness and our success because it speaks to a sense an internalized sense of inadequacy and unworthiness. I think it speaks to our primal fear, which is that of disconnection. And so, although I and others understand shame as one of the most toxic emotions, extremely destructive, if not devastating, really known as the enemy, our special guest, Nathalie Martinek, has figured out how to transform this incredibly disruptive force into an ally. She's going to teach us about the three shames and how to transform shame from a source of distress into a positive force that reinforces our personal values and can enhance our ability to act with integrity and authenticity. So I'm super excited to introduce our amazing Dr. Nathalie Martinek. I'm going to read a little bit about her bio. You guys, you're in for a treat here. Dr. Nathalie Martinek is an ex-systems biologist and cancer researcher turned consultant, group facilitator, and independent medical culture researcher. She specializes in helping individuals and groups navigate professional relationships and workplaces that feature burnout, bullying, and narcissistic leadership. Her clients develop interpersonal skills that facilitate effective leadership, psychological safety, conflict resolution, and purposeful relationships. I am so excited to, if I haven't said that enough, you guys, to welcome you back, Dr. Nathalie, because really, Dr. Nathalie is brilliant and thoughtful, and on such an important topic as this, I couldn't think of a better guest to bring on to explore the multifaceted aspects, the science and spirituality, and the psychology and the personal experiences of shame. So welcome, Dr. Nathalie.
Oh, thank you, Roshanak, Dr. Roshanak. It's so great to be back again so soon. Thank you.
Well, we had so much to discuss the last time that we really needed to bring you back. And we were talking about conscious business and workplace culture and toxic workplace and how narcissism plays a role in that, or narcissistic traits. Before we go any further, though, I would like to put out a disclaimer that in this show, we are not giving out any medical, clinical, or otherwise professional advice or instructions. This show is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The attendees should consult with a qualified professional for advice tailored to their specific circumstances. So I just wanted to put that out there. Moving forward, let's start with the basics, because I always love to start with the basics. I think it's really important that we set the ground rules. So I would like to ask you first to define shame for us in the more professional, academic way, and perhaps then in your redefined understanding of shame, because you've done a lot of research on it. And I'd love to know if you might share with us why you have delved into this really important topic, because you work with toxic situations, people, interpersonal relationships on a personal and professional level. And we know how important shame is for all of that. But I'd like to know, how would you describe your journey into getting deeper into your work on shame?
Okay, so a few things. So defining shame according to how it's understood academically or in even popular culture, how I've come to see it, and why I had become interested in it in the first place. So the mainstream understanding of shame, which is the understanding that I have as well, is that shame is an emotion that arises when you believe you've done something wrong and you feel embarrassed about your actions. And shame overall has a really bad reputation. Um, Often it's known as a toxic emotion or destructive emotion, like anger. Um, and so this is a problem because emotions are all neutral. Some feel good and some don't. Some can feel painful as well. So because there's an association between pain and the feeling, and the thoughts that are accompanied by that feeling, it has become assumed and has gained the reputation of being a negative emotion or a toxic emotion. And nobody likes to feel bad, of course, but it's not helpful, especially if we all have these emotions and they're there for a reason. So, shame, if you want to strip away the feelings and the narratives associated with it, and so some of those narratives are: I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I have no value, I'm completely insignificant, I'm inadequate, I'm inferior. Uh, it can also come out as arrogance, excessive pride, I'm better than everyone, as a self protective narrative. There's also the fear associated that is also accompanied with shame of losing one's status, not belonging, being expelled from a group, loss of life or annihilation, and being kicked out of a group, like a family or friend group, company, etc. So it's quite complex, but they're all narratives. They're not the pure emotion. So my understanding that I've come to, and this is also academic, and it's also traditional ideas of shame, that it is associated with a sense of belonging, as a result of you taking an action that is congruent with your moral principles. So when your action is incongruent with your moral principles, your values, or what your conscience would say it's the right thing to do, so when there's a behavior that doesn't match these principles, then you will experience shame. So shame is actually a moral emotion. It tells you you're right from wrong and whether or not you've behaved in accordance with your own moral philosophy and principles. So I'll extend that a little bit further, because we are not individuals. We look like individuals, but we're actually in relation and connection with many people. And not just with people, we're in relationship with communities and different contexts. And those different contexts have rules and norms and their own set of values and principles that we may or may not have contributed to. So we have to see ourselves and the emotions we experience in relation to these different environments. And the environment plays a massive part in how we see ourselves and how we respond to other people's behaviors as well as our own, and how people respond to our own behaviors. So if you're in an environment where you don't have the highest status, you're not the leader of the pack, you're just somebody within the pack or within a group, you might also feel shame when your actions don't match what is expected of you or doesn't match what the norms expect of you. And so that's different than you violating your own moral principles. You're violating principles that were never, not necessarily established by you, or even if they were contributed by you, breaking those rules, violating them in some way, or being seen as not living up to them or living up to expectations of this external authority, whether it's a person, a group, or a bunch of rules, you can also experience shame. So that's how I've extended shame from something that happens internal to us to how it's in how this feeling and the way we see ourselves is influenced by what's going on outside of us. And so the final question you asked is, how did I get into it? Well, I experienced over my life long periods of what you can call depression, but not clinical depression, just feeling really terrible about myself, that I had no value, no worth, I wasn't good enough, I didn't fit in, I didn't belong anywhere, no one loved me. And one year, this was, 7 years ago, um, it's not like anything happened, just I started to experience this sense of insignificance, no value, I don't matter, why am I even here? I have no purpose, I'm not contributing anything, I'm useless. All these narratives. And no matter what I did, I had all these, if you look at societal values and what matters and signs of success, I had all that going for me. But yet that wasn't enough. So why was I experiencing this feeling where I wasn't good enough, despite the external factors, good family, marriage, house, job, fulfilling relationships, meaningful work, etc. Those weren't fulfilling or sufficient enough for me to feel better or good about myself. So it was that put me through this process of trying to understand, what is this feeling and how the hell do I get out of it? And it wasn't till I got to the other side that I recognized what had been going on. There was a bigger picture process going on that I didn't see at the time, which was that I was actually being extracted from groups, not just one, but several groups that I thought were necessary for my well-being, and they weren't. And because these groups didn't align with my set of principles and values and the ethical value that I place on people's conduct and approach to life. And I didn't realize it. It was like I was being just withdrawn from it, not intentionally withdrawing with a sense of control. So that was what was contributing to this prolonged emotional state, which people would call toxic shame, because I was feeling bad about myself all the time, and it was making me not want to exist here anymore. So we blame the emotion rather than the narratives and the assumptions that we're making because of this internal experience of this emotion that we're having. So that's the beginning of that research in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for your authenticity, for your honesty, and your clarity. As we said earlier, as I was saying when I opened up the show, one of the most important aspects of Mindset, Heartset, Reset, and of which I'm so proud, is that we have these authentic conversations. And it's a lot of truth telling, because I believe, and back me up on this one if it's true, that when we hear other people's stories, their truths, their journeys, it, first of all, speaking of shame, helps to relieve us of some shame of being the only one who is a certain way, the odd person out, ostracized, unworthy, unacceptable, etc. And it also allows us, on the flip side of that, to connect to others. And I said that in the beginning too, disconnection is painful for us. That's why being ostracized is painful. There's a real powerful and lasting pain to rejection. And it's in the body and it's in the psyche. And we can connect it on so many levels. We could talk about it from the perspective of anthropology and say that historically we were able to survive because we were in tribes. That gave us a better statistical chance of surviving. We could talk about it in terms of our biology and our biological systems, that even from birth, we know that if we don't have good, excuse me, healthy relations, there can be up to 100% mortality rate from preemies to newborns. And then the outcomes of medical therapies as adults is also connected to whether or not we have that healthy relationship with others that makes us feel that we are supported, that we are not alone, that makes us feel love. Let's be honest, that's what it comes down to. We know from the Harvard study on adult development, which is the most extensive and certainly the longest study on health and well-being and happiness, that the number one single greatest influence is good, stable relationships. So no matter how you slice it, as the commercial went, it comes up peanuts. And we come up with the same thing over and over again, which is that we are biologically engineered to connect. We require that for good biological health. Our neurodevelopment requires it because our brain is developing. If we don't have that, or the opposite of it, it can be very problematic and can cause damage and permanent damage to our neural pathways and our neurodevelopment. We know from our own personal experiences how awful it feels to be in the out group, as it's called. And so when it comes to shame, we see that fundamentally feeling that we are not accepted translates to us as, number one, the terror of survival. Will I be able to make it on my own, as it were? We know that we are going to be in biopsychospiritual pain from the disconnection, and we're going to suffer from that. And so what I love about what you're doing here is bringing forth the sort of fundamental assumptions and frameworks that are necessary for us to understand this process and where it goes astray. And also from your own, and thank you so much for explaining and expressing your personal journey to how you got here. And I think that if any of us would dare to say that they haven't experienced shame, I would say that either you're lying or you're just unaware of what's going on. Because as children, that's typically how we end up feeling with our parents, unless you have the very, very, very rare parent who doesn't shame you as a child and say, don't be a bad boy, don't be a bad girl, bad boys do this, bad girls do that, you're being bad. This is how it has to be. And that hierarchy is set up immediately in childhood because we know our survival depends on these caretakers, our parents. And so if there's one of the big reasons we might end up with shame is through this relationship, even under the best case and the most well-intentioned parents that are going to make us feel unworthy and bad about ourselves, which in our child baby brain makes us feel threatened, our survival feel threatened. And if we don't fall in line with what is the custom, the norm, the rules that's accepted with our first social circle, which is our family, then already we are in threat mode. We're being threatened. Our survival is threatened. The love is threatened. All of it's threatened. Because the truth is that our relationships, a good stable relationships or love, is one of our basic primitive needs, as shown by science and medicine. So where shame first arises potentially out of childhood misunderstanding, misconceptions, or outright abuse, that we first take on this self-blame, this I'm not good enough, it's my fault, And before we have words for it, we feel it in our bodies, because that's a way of taking control of the situation. Because if something's wrong with the parents, that's a real threat to our survival. But if it's me, then I can have some kind of control over the situation, because I can change. I can become more worthy. I can do something to become more lovable. So I wonder if you could speak to that, and how that then extends out into our relationships as we grow up, into our workplace dynamics, all of it, because we set up this hierarchy. We internalize this horrible feeling that goes into our mind and body, but then eventually extends out into every aspect of our lives. And we carry that forth in the dynamics, both giving and receiving of shame and blame, as adults. Can you speak to that and that process for us, please?
Yeah, so again, there's nothing like hard science conclusive that talks about this. There's obviously a number of theories. And if you think about infancy and the development of attachment, secure attachment between parent or mother and baby, when a parent is attuned to the baby's needs and is responsive, appropriately responsive, the baby feels secure. That baby has need, parent responds, and baby is soothed. So when the parent isn't as attuned or isn't as responsive, the baby can't be soothed when it's experiencing instability or unmet need, emotional need, physical need, whatever the need is, in baby world. And so that creates some sort of rupture. And so if you have enough of these over a period of time, as well as other behaviors like what you described as abuse or neglect, then that creates an internal experience of pain, that again is not necessarily understood by the baby, but it creates a pattern of recognizing that if I behave this way, I can expect a certain response from a parent, or I can't predict the response from a parent. And so that creates the internal, identity over time with that child of how they see themselves in relation to that authority. And so we take that identity and that understanding of ourselves into all our relationships with anyone else we perceive as an authority, or anything else we perceive as an authority, not necessarily a human. It could be, again, an institution, a set of rules, science, like a discipline, that's an authority. So this is our earliest experiences, and the way we're brought up and the way we are treated by our primary caregivers gives us a sense of who we are and how we can see ourselves, and an idea of right from wrong according to what the authority demands or expects of us. And that is internalized, as you mentioned. And it, again, becomes part of our psyche and the way we navigate our relationships. So because we have this familiar relational blueprint, as I like to call it, we then seek out unknowingly, not necessarily intentionally, people or authorities that are familiar, even if the familiar authorities don't help us feel secure. They continue to say or do things that make us feel ashamed about ourselves. It reinforces a sense of rejection or abandonment or unworthiness. Or the opposite, these relations affirm and reinforce sense of value and love and worthiness. So, and we have a mixed bag of this throughout our upbringing. Can't say everyone in our lives are really bad and treat us terribly, or everyone in our lives treats us amazingly. Whereas there's some people who might believe that because they have a very disconnected view of their own reality, and they have excessive pride and think they're amazing and everyone loves them. And we tend to call those people narcissists. But the rest of us, we're going to have a mixed bag of these relational dynamics, but unknowingly and unintentionally, we can seek out familiar relational dynamics that can reinforce the things we've come to believe about ourselves, good or bad. So that's, a generalized explanation of what happens from, our earliest experiences of life into adulthood. And so if we go into our education systems or workplace systems, they are hierarchical. There is a clear authority. who has specific demands. And if you want to be successful, you have to achieve, you have to gain their acceptance, their approval, and do all the tasks and be a certain way that it appeals to them so that you are successful. So your survival and success is also dependent on your relationship with that authority, and whether or not you can successfully navigate and rise through this hierarchy, whether it's in a school system or educational system, academic system, workplace, friend group, cults, doesn't matter, family, doesn't matter. This is how we end up seeing ourselves. So we can feel, we can experience. So I'm very conscious and cautious about how I use the word shame, because we can say shame is caused by all these things, these external factors, rather than shame is an emotional experience or an emotional state that I am currently having as a result of the things that are occurring outside of me as well as inside of me. And if I'm not cautious, I'm going to start to believe that these internalized conditions, narratives that pop up when I have this emotional experience, that I believe that these things are true. Because those narratives about when we experience this neutral emotion of shame are generally quite negative, and they're all what I would call bullshit. So that's where we get into trouble, where we start to believe that these narratives that we have the moment we experience this feeling of shame, because it's been reinforced throughout our life, the connection between those narratives and this emotional state that I'm calling shame, that we start to believe it. Now, there's, of course, a flip side to this, because there are times where we do bad things and that we don't behave in accordance to important rules and norms or our own. So it's necessary for us to feel shame and to feel bad because we've broken a rule or we violated something that is really important to ourselves. And if we didn't feel bad, we'd have no necessarily instinctual impulse to want to do better next time. So it helps us to align better with our moral compass and our moral principles. And again, there's a group of people where they know they're right from wrong and they don't care. And so I'd call those people shameless. And then there's another group of people who don't necessarily have a compass and just behave according to however they want. And those people tend to fall into the, cluster B or, dark triad personality traits. So, and they're happy to cause people pain in, some of the, subset of that group. So that's the complexity of shame.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
The abridged version. Okay, so first of all, to separate out, so what you were describing as shame is that moves into shame being your ally, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. It seemed to me more like the definition of guilt. So shame, as far as I understand it, is a deeply internalized and inseparable from a sense of inadequacy, unworthiness, unlovableness, as you will. And so when something happens or when we do something that is quote unquote shameful, that is not in accordance with whatever the framework is that is supposed to be followed, then we feel that we inherently have failed, are not enough, are failures, inadequate again. Guilt, on the other hand, is, from my perspective, is when we recognize that something that we've done is not representative of our values and who we are typically. So I recognize that I've done something that is out of alignment with who I am and who I want to be and who I see myself as and what my values are. And guilt, when I feel guilty, what do we do? Guilt is like broadcast and put under the spotlight, right? I feel guilty. I go to everyone. Oh my God, Natalie, do you know what I did? I feel so guilty. What should I do? That sort of thing. Guilt is out in broad daylight. Guilt is all the way out, is shared, is understood as this behavior is incongruent with my behavior normally, who I am, what my values are, and how I what I believe in and therefore how I behave. Shame. Shame hides in the darkest recesses, in the lowest base, in the sub basement. We want it in the darkest place so nobody can see it because it is such a threat to us. Whatever it is, where we've fallen short, we feel that is who we are. Even if some part of us is like, I know that's not who I am. Somehow we've internalized, we've taken that feeling, as you were saying, and said, this defines me. And if people recognize that definition of me, that's it, it's over. I'm rejected, I'm out there, I'm ostracized, I'll live and die alone, my life will stink, it's all over. So we hide shame, we hide it because we don't want people to discover our shortcomings, our inadequacies, how we are unworthy, less than, not good enough. That's how I have seen shame and guilt and differentiate them.
So
you're on it before I ask the question. Go.
Yeah, because I mean, these are the words we use based on the experiences that we have. I tend to see shame as secondary. So no emotion exists by itself. Emotions cluster together. So shame, you do an act, you know it's the wrong thing. Guilt comes because you're like, oh, like I've stolen
But wait,
something.
stop right there. Is it the wrong thing or is it not in accordance with yeah?
Okay, so there's the rules out there that say right from wrong, and then you have your rules in here that say right from wrong.
So I just want to take a minute and make sure that people get that. We're talking about two different frameworks, two different conditions, they're different. And I don't think that people really pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Very important point you brought up. There is the shame, there is the environment, there is the what I know, and then there is the what is out there that I'm supposed to subscribe to, behave as, adhere to, align with.
Yes. And some of what I feel inside is correct or the right thing to do will match some of the things that are on the outside. So they're easier to align with. And so when I break a rule that, like don't steal, and I go and shoplift. So I know it's the wrong thing. There's a thrill in shoplifting. So I'm, living into some other priority. But I've broken the rule out there as well. So I didn't get caught. Yay. But I have to live with the violation. I know that I've breached my own rules. So there's the shame that comes up from doing that, even though I didn't necessarily know that in the moment. I probably did feel guilty in the moment, but it didn't kick in until after the fact when I'm alone and I didn't get caught, but I still feel terrible about what I did.
Where you have to like face yourself, look in the mirror, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Who am I? So yes. I feel a sense of guilt that I want to either fess up, which is not that smart, or vow to never do it again, or confess to a friend that I've done it and I feel awful about it. That way I'm restoring a sense of good person or benevolence in myself by confessing to someone else. There's something about confessing our sins that can help us feel better about ourselves, that I'm acknowledging I've done the wrong thing. And whether or not I believe in God doesn't matter. Maybe that's helping me improve that connection or that relationship, but it's helping me restore a sense of rightness because I'm acknowledging it and I'm trying to rectify it in this small way by confessing it. So that's why I think some people do I feel guilty about this, I feel guilty about that. But sometimes people do that to virtue signal as well. Look how good I am. Look, there's lots of reasons that are, again, I believe a response to a sense of shame. So I feel like shame is like the core emotion, and guilt and we could feel anger when we also feel shame. We can experience anger when we also feel shame. We could feel sadness, and that can be translated into anger. There's lots of clustering of emotions, but I feel like shame is fundamental because it tells me about myself and how I've behaved, whether I'm, congruent with my best self, the self that I want the world to see, the self that I want myself to be. And that way I feel worthy and of value and good enough. And I breached that. I violated that. I sullied that through my actions. I need to figure out a way to restore that. And
it's coming back into alignment with who we believe ourselves to be.
Yeah. So I will no longer steal. I won't shoplift again. And that is me coming back into alignment, even though I have this, sin from the past.
Right. And this is
Yeah.
very different than the shame. So there are two things that I want to get into here. One is shame is this contagion, it's viral and leads to bullying, and how bullies are hiding their shame by spotlighting your shame. And so there are three things I want to get into. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. Yay. Um,
Love it.
love it. One is the fact that shame is viral and how it connects to bullying. Two is this concept of humiliation and this idea of there's the shame that is incidental, I'll say, where I have assumed things, um, algorithms, um, equations, and I mucked up a variable or somebody unintentionally, and now I feel ashamed. Versus, for example, when a bully will shame you to humiliate you, and how that is different because there's, as you were saying, anger. There's an anger there that comes with humiliation of I am wrongfully being shamed versus maybe I am rightfully being shamed. They're
Yeah.
very different things, and they lead to different behaviors, and including resentment and so bullying and humiliation are where I'd like to go to next before we jump into the three shames.
I love it. Okay. So we won't go into the three shames yet because we need to talk about the shame compass because that
Right.
relates to the bullying and humiliation
Love it. We have a shame
aspect.
compass, folks. Are you listening?
Yeah. So it's not my compass. I didn't come up with this. It was an academic named Dr. Nathanson. This came out 1987. Google it, or sorry, search it. The shame compass. So it suggests that this framework suggests that when we experience shame, we could do one of four different reactions. One is we attack others. So that's where the bullying stuff comes in. We can attack ourselves, which is often what happens when you're a victim of abuse or neglect growing up, and you see your actions, others see your actions as wrong, and therefore you see your actions as wrong, and you start to, take yourself down. You can withdraw. So you enter into some avoidant tactics, or you just disconnect from people temporarily and, seek out your own space because you want to distance yourself from them seeing your shame, like what you said, to keep it hidden. Or I can isolate myself and end up in, sort of loneliness. And the withdrawal can also lead to addiction. So I numb myself with all sorts of substances or activities so that I don't have to feel this thing. Whereas when I isolate, I'm just completely by myself and nobody could see me. And that way I can hide with my shame. So those are the
Can you
four
explain the
different
difference between the
responses.
withdrawal and the isolation?
So, yes, so withdrawal is like I'm hiding. I'm hiding out. I'll avoid people. I won't call them back when they're checking in on me. They'll start to worry. Maybe that helps me feel like I'm getting attention,
Right.
but I'm just in hiding. And sorry, and the other one, the avoidance. So the withdrawal is isolation, and the avoidance is the denial, addiction um, types of behaviors. So
Thank
I
you.
either avoid or I withdraw and isolate. I attack other and attack self. So four different responses. That's your shame compass. So some people have different, default. A lot of people go into attacking other, and that's been the focus of most of my work around narcissism, bullying, etc. That when I'm feeling the sense of shame because I'm being seen as having done the wrong thing, um, even if I haven't done the wrong thing, or even if I have done the wrong thing, I will blame them. I will shame them. I will make them sorry for ever having accused me, or suggested, or challenged me, or threatened me in any way that made me see myself in a less ideal way. How dare you? So I'll attack you. That's my response to shame. Yeah. So that's and that can lead to bullying.
And I was hoping now that you would speak a little bit to bullying for us.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
We want everything. We're
So
going to squeeze out everything we can
yeah,
right
yeah, let's bring it up. Okay. So bullying doesn't happen overnight. You are, so say I'm the bully. I'm going about my business. I think everything's fine. And I notice somebody looking at me the wrong way, or that person reminds me of someone who annoyed me in the past or was horrible to me in the past, or that person who I thought was my friend said, or my colleague gave me some feedback that stung, that hurt my ego a little bit, even if they said it in a very gentle and loving and kind and supportive way. I'm experiencing that as mean spirited, and that they're jealous and they want to take me down. So I'm feeling a little bit threatened here. So instead of me owning the feedback and taking responsibility or reflecting on it, or doing all those things that a lot of reasonable people will do, I'm going to start to externalize my shame and put it on that person. They are the cause of me feeling bad. They are the cause of now my stress. So they need to pay. So I'm going to start to target them and make them, the to try to eliminate them from my view, because they're the constant reminder of my experience of shame that I have not been able to resolve, that I've not been able to make sense of, because it continues. Looking at them makes me continually feel inadequate, inferior, not good enough, a bad person. I fear, being not belonging, not being accepted, all that, all the fears, all the narratives, that the negative narratives that we know is accompanied by that feeling of shame. So I'm going to start to continually target that person, um, and I'll do it in a way that they won't know. But I'm not thinking I'm targeting them. I'm just doing what I need to do to defend myself and preserve myself and try to restore this image that person, that I believe that person has destroyed. So I might smear their name to our colleagues or our peers, our mutuals. I might exclude them from social gatherings. Intentionally forget to invite them. I might, if I'm their boss or manager, I might overload them with work, or micromanage them, or make them feel stupid in some way, or change the rules and the expectations without letting them know, so that they start to feel crazy, but also inadequate. I'm going to do to them how they're making me feel, except as the bully, who's not the narcissistic bully, who's the intentional harmer. I'm the one who's the victim here. I'm going to, you know, do whatever that I think is self-protective and self-defensive, because they're the enemy and they're actually the threat, not me. So that's how I respond to shame. That's my attack the other response of the shame compass. And humiliation's part of it. So let me just speak to that and how I distinguish that from embarrassment. Because when we know we've done the wrong thing, so I might be in this interview with you right now, and I'll listen to it later when it's out, and I'll hear what I've said, and I'd be like, oh man, I can't believe I said that. That was just so not what I wanted to say. I completely misrepresented everything. I feel so stupid. So I feel embarrassed now because I had something in my control and I didn't, perform according to what I believe is my, ideal image. That's embarrassment. Whereas humiliation is a loss of status because of someone's accusation or someone's kind of surprise takedown that you didn't see coming. Someone you trusted suddenly betrays you. There's a shock, there's a surprise element. Um, or you knew your actions were bad and they can, come back and haunt you, but you don't expect when it actually happens. So you feel either way, you feel humiliated. It's a loss of this perceived status or prestige and how others view you, as well as how you view you. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, someone humiliates you, they take you down. It's associated with a blight on your pride, but really it's about a loss of status.
I love it. And we have the comment that says, attack myself, I know it well. Yeah, aren't we all? I love that. And so, okay, so we've talked about the shame compass. We've differentiated between embarrassment, humiliation, shame, and guilt. Um, guess where we're going to go next?
Are
The
we going to talk about the three
three
shames?
shames. Can't wait to talk about the three shames. Do tell us, Dr. Nathalie Martinek, from your own work and research, what have you come up with? These three
Oh,
shames.
okay. So like I said, we have our own inner values and principles, and then there's the outer values, principles, norms, and expected behaviors. Now, that comes with a caveat. Not everyone is aware of their inner values and principles because of their conditioning, the way they've been brought up, their experiences, traumas, whatever. They have put more value on how others see them. So their identity is connected to either an authority's identity and how that authority needs to view them and how that authority needs to use them. And so how I function in relation to serving that authority. So I have no identity center. My identity is dependent on how others see me. My function is dependent on how others need me. So I have a lack of clarity about what I actually do stand for or what I don't stand for. I'm constantly deferring to the outer authority and whoever's stronger or dominant in my relationships. And so I might, express different values and principles and behaviors dependent on the authority around me and their expectation of me. Um, so that's the caveat. But generally, we know we have a sense of right from wrong. Hopefully, those values have been instilled in us, and we have ways of expressing our principles externally through our behavior, what we say and what we don't say, what we don't do. And then there are those of the outer, the institutions and the outer authorities, or those that try to be our authorities. They have their own expectations, rules, morals, and expected behaviors. So that's the foundation. So I've come up with 3 different scenarios to describe our experience of shame as our enemy, the reason why we blame shame and think it's toxic. So do you want me to go through them sequentially?
Sure,
Okay.
please.
Okay, so the first one is I'm safer, and I'll give little scenarios as an example to make it easier to understand. So I'm working in an academic institution. Of course, there are policies and expectations of how you conduct yourself as an employee. And so I also have, what I know to be right and wrong. And I do my best to live into those policies and to conduct myself well because, well, I have a reputation and I need to maintain a good reputation. And that's really necessary for my ability to, get promoted and, move around professionally as I would like. So I come across somebody who has greater status than me, who's an authority in my team or my group, and they're telling me I'm not doing a good job, or they're pulling me up on some, what I'm wearing that day, or, Wednesday is blue day. And I didn't know Wednesday is blue day, so you can only wear blue. And I turn up with black. And so I violated these rules that no one told me about or that I thought were kind of stupid. And there are consequences for that. But I didn't actually do anything wrong, especially if I didn't know the rules, or the rules are ridiculous and I had nothing to do with them. And they're like imposed on me. I have to follow them. But they don't cause harm to anyone if I don't. So I didn't break my rules, but somehow I broke their rules, or I didn't break their rules. Just somebody isn't happy with something about me, but there's no clear rule or norm. There's just the unspoken norm, but the rule is not explicit in any way. So I didn't actually do anything wrong according to my standards of practice. I didn't actually cause anyone harm. Just someone is not pleased with me. I've violated some external rule. But my experience is I feel bad now because I didn't get the approval. I met the disapproval of this authority. And how am I going to recover from that? So I start to blame myself for not knowing enough or not doing well enough. And so that shame is my enemy. But if we could take a step back, take a breather, and go, wait a minute, this isn't my rule, and I didn't do anything wrong. Nobody was harmed by this. No one was hurt by this. It's kind of stupid. I didn't create this rule. And that external authority doesn't define what my value and what my, principles are. There's actually nothing wrong with me. It's this crazy sort of external thing. So I've been able to take a step back and distance myself or create a division between what I know is right from wrong, from whatever they think is right from wrong, I'm able to scrutinize it and go, that's crazy. And that has nothing to do with me. That's them. That's their issue, not mine. So that's how I turn this enemy, where I felt bad about breaking some arbitrary rule, to feeling better about myself, that it's a them problem, not a me problem. So that's shame one.
Shame
Ready?
one.
Shame
Yeah.
one. Any
Okay.
questions, or shall
So
I continue?
if we put that into one sentence, and so I'm going to look up your Substack, or maybe you could write that in the chat if you don't mind, while I
Oh,
speak
the
for a
one
moment.
statement of the scenario. Okay, so the statement is of
Yes,
shame
please.
one is, I broke their rules and I neither followed nor broke my rules.
Right. So you have written an article, and I don't know if it's, so for those of you
I'll
who,
put it in the
for
chat.
those of you who do or don't know, Dr. Nathalie Martinek has a Substack, which is extraordinary. I read it as soon as it comes out. I'm like, yay! And it's extremely enlightening. And she puts out an extraordinary amount of information for free. So you can join her Substack. You can subscribe for free. But she also has a paywall where she puts out even more stuff, which is it's it's the greatest. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I'm not sure if that article was behind a paywall or not. But
It's
yeah,
not. Some of it is, but where I talk about these 3 shames, that's available to anybody.
great. So it's up on the screen, everyone. If you click that, you can pick up this article for free. And I invite you to subscribe to Dr. Nathalie's Substack so you don't miss out on all the amazing topics that she talks about and really unpacks them like she has done with shame, from a very original, thoughtful, and biopsychospiritual perspective. So if you pick up that article, you will see and read about the 3 shames, and there's a graphic. And let's go on. So the first shame is, again,
I broke their rules and I neither followed nor broke my rules.
and the line for the second shame is,
I broke my rules to follow their rules.
and would you please tell us about that one, please?
Okay, so this one's juicy because
Yes.
it refers to moral injury, which has, become a topic on many people's minds.
Everybody's saying moral injury now.
Everybody,
Most people don't
yeah,
even know what it is. Yeah.
yes, or they're defining it, you know, in a way that everyone now has moral injury. You go to work and we have moral injury. So I broke my rules to follow their rules. So if you imagine, say, being in the military, which is where the term moral injury came from, that you're trained in the military and then you're sent off to war, and you don't, you're highly trained, you know what you're expected to do, but then you do the act. You end up, you know, killing some civilians as part of, the collateral damage of what you're, fighting for. And you come back, you might have been injured or not, and you're just no longer in service for a while. So you actually have the space to start to think about what you've done. And you recognize, oh my goodness, I knew what I had to do, but it actually violated my moral principles. I ended up taking the lives of people who I consider innocent. And this wasn't, even though I knew that is a possibility, it doesn't sit well with me. And I'm starting to feel like I'm the worst person on earth and I don't deserve to live. So that is an extreme example of moral injury, where I've violated my morals to the point where it's like a stain on my soul and I can't get that stain off, and nothing will ever get that stain off. I'm stuck with this uh, sin or violation forever. Um, so, and it's because my actions harmed someone else, but it also harmed me because of the extent of this moral violation. So that's what moral injury is. It's not, I've witnessed somebody get hurt and so now I'm injured. It's, I've witnessed somebody getting hurt in the workplace, for example, like I witnessed a bully attacking a victim, and I did nothing. Um, and so, in a sense, I'm part of the problem because I didn't do anything, whereas everything inside me says you need to stand up for that person. But you're also aware, if you stand up for that person to this bully, you'll become a target too, and you will suffer consequences, and it doesn't make sense. When you go through this kind of decision-making process, you recognize, well, this is the morally right thing for me to do. It's actually intellectually, economically, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, the wrong thing. I need to find a different way of dealing with this. But if I don't have a different way to deal with this that rectifies this unintended violation, I'm going to start feeling like crap about myself, and similar to, the first example with military person, that I don't deserve to live in some extreme cases. So I broke my rules because I had to follow the external rules. So we had a lot of this during COVID with doctors and medical students, especially medical students who were not trained to deal with, this type of catastrophic or this emergency. They didn't have enough, protective equipment. They're sent out into this battle. They have these patients, and they had to work out, not necessarily med students, but the people who work in ICU, who's most likely to live. So they have to, use a bunch of arbitrary information and comorbidity information to determine who gets to live and who doesn't. And so their decisions directly have impact on the life of someone else. And it's an unprecedented circumstance, but that doesn't take this moral compass away. And so they put someone on who had, no comorbidities on a ventilation, and they didn't live. And they're like, oh, maybe we could have put this other patient instead. So I can't imagine the stuff that they're going through in their head, but there wasn't a different response. There's lots of things that were done that the doctors, med students knew weren't correct things to do, but they had to do it. They were sent off. They had to do it according to the authority, and they didn't feel strong enough or, have the economic, I guess, security to stand up to it or do something else. So they went against their moral code, and in doing so, it also harmed someone else or potentially harmed someone else. So this is an example of I broke my rules to follow their rules. It happens a lot in workplaces. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to rock the boat. I'll just follow along, even though I know it's the wrong thing to do. And over time, I'll just, somehow ignore it or suppress it. And, it'll come out, manifest in some way. But right now, I can't deal with it because it's too hard and I need to survive in this organization.
Would you say that one of the main variable or the main reasons that we might break our own rules in favor of others, especially institutional or even something like a family, is because of an absence of resources? For example, if you're not financially able to, if you don't have enough of a social circle to support you, should you leave the group? Whatever that is there's a lack of support structure to allow you to keep your own rules at the expense of others' rules.
Yeah, that's an example. But I would go even deeper, that there's people who don't have support structures or trustworthy support structures, because that's unfortunately what they've, that's what's been brought about in their life. What they're lacking, the important resource, is their self-worth. Because if they have self-worth, then they're like, well, I don't really care what any of you think. I know this is the wrong thing, and I'm going to take the step, and I don't care if you, excommunicate me, and I'm ostracized. You're the ones who are doing the things that are not great. I'm going to stick to my convictions, even with these consequences. So someone
But that takes a tremendous amount of fortitude, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Yes. So that's not something that most of us are great at. That is something that we can work on. And like why we're talking about shame, these are the steps that we take to discover, how these narratives of shame get in the way of us activating our self-worth that's in there somewhere. We just have to access it to start to bring it out and enhance it, and accept ourselves, approve of ourselves, and seek out support and love that, reinforce these feelings rather than are a barrier to them. So,
which I think is great, because it speaks to basically the antithesis of shame, or the opposite of shame is which is about lacking self-worth, a sense of unworthiness. is a sense of dignity,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
being a sense of not hubris but pride. This I would say it's like a connection. I'm going to go into that sort of psychospiritual aspect of it, which is this connection to my innate value
Mm.
as being an individuation of the divine, as being worthy because here I am, like any other human being or any other being at all. You want to say something? Go ahead.
No, I'm like nodding along, agreeing with you.
I love when you do that.
Yeah.
So being able to bring ourselves, and the work is always done. I say this all the time. We are supposed to do the work before the storm. We don't start preparing for the storm when the storm is upon us. We prepare for the storm before the storm comes. So this, people are like, I'm doing the work, and what's the point? The point is then when you are faced with a challenge, you have that fortitude. You are reinforced, as it were, and able to then have the strength, have the resources, have the drive, have the direction to take the action that is in alignment with oneself. I've been teaching this to my group about identity and meaning is know thyself and to thine own self be true. Those are the two things.
Yeah.
And to know yourself is the first part, but then to consistently take those decisions that may go against the grain, as it were, because you are to thine own self being true, as Shakespeare would say, that prevents us from coming out of alignment, from cognitive dissonance, from
Yeah.
the moral injury, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, to put it similarly, that we have inherent worth and value and
Yes.
significance and importance,
Yes.
but the more we seek it out, evidence from external sources, the less we're likely to be able to access the self-worth, because they're conditional. They're conditional on other people's expectations or approval of us. So what this shame stuff, and it's again not the shame, it's our dysfunctional response to the experience of shame, or that emotional state of shame, that is problematic or can be problematic. It's once you start to go, I'm experiencing this icky feeling of shame, and the narrative that's popping up is I'm a shitty person. Well, I need to go, why am I a shitty person? What did I do? Was it, did I oppose my moral principles and values in this situation? I need to be able to zoom out and look at all the different variables in my situation for me to work out, wait a minute, I didn't actually do anything wrong. I didn't actually violate, or I did violate my values and morals. And this is how I can go about rectifying it and restore that sense of goodness or worth, or that was there all along. So this work is to, you know, basically remove the conditioning that is covering up this belief that I have value no matter what I do, that I don't need to be useful or functional or whatever to someone else for me to feel like, to believe that I'm enough. But I have to do the work to slough all that stuff off instead of reacting to that feeling of shame and the narrative. It's the narrative that is the problem. It's the wrong narrative, because there's different narratives that are like hidden with the shame. And all it is I didn't act in accordance with my principle. There's no judgment there. It's just a fact. I did or I did not act in according to my principle. So if we could remove the judgment and all the kind of additional emotions from the moment, we could start to access shame as our ally. So for shame too, which is I broke my rules to follow their rules, instead of believing I'm a terrible person, I could say instead, as the ally, shame is my messenger letting me know that I have, opportunity here to rectify this. Is I violated my own principle, and I have an opportunity to examine myself, learn from the experience, take accountability, and repair this rupture. And it's not an easy thing to do. And it feels, that I'm going to feel like shameful for a little bit. But when I'm able to take actions and I'm reclaiming a sense of control in myself, and that will help me feel empowered again. And that is, again, a step towards restoring this sense of self or identity. And not making it about me as a bad person. I don't stay a bad person. And it's not, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person. Those are irrelevant narratives. I'm a person, and I make choices that either move in alignment with principles and values or are misaligned and or misattuned, and I can learn from it and change and improve. That's it. But that it takes work to get to that point where you can objectively look at your actions that way, rather than going, oh, I'm always a good person, that's their problem, or I'm always a bad person, I'm never going to be good enough.
I love that. And that this is the way to transformation. And some people say that the whole point of our lives, or part of it, is the journey to come back to the truth of who we were when we were born. Just sloughing off, as you said, is removing all that doesn't belong to us. What I say is, my version of it is pulling out the bugs in our programming. We were programmed properly, but all these bugs got in. We need to pull the bugs out of the programming, and they are the hidden scripts. They are the internalized narratives. They are the unexamined truth, or more importantly, the unexamined emotions, because especially in the West, we are not equipped well to manage to handle our emotions. We just go around it, ignore it, distract myself, this, that, whatever. But what we're doing is we're carrying around this like ginormous, weight, this ball and chain, as it were, of all the lies that we've internalized, of all the stories that are not our own stories, but that we adopted and adapted to, and constructed a self that is out of alignment completely with the authentic self. And so all that you're saying is an amazing strategy, a beautiful blueprint for how to come back into living authentically. Because so many people are like, I don't even know what that is, especially as they get older. Like, I don't, 40 years, I don't, what does that even mean? And what it means is exactly what you're saying, is to be present, our conscious awareness, so that that you have this emotion, that these feelings or these emotions, and then what do they mean? I always talk about how we have to sleuth when we get an emotion. It's a messenger. I love that you said that, because that messenger is giving you really, really, really valuable information if you will listen. Sit down, have a cup of tea, have a little chat, let it tell you the truth. And then you decide if that's a true truth. There you go. If that's a true truth or a false truth that you've internalized, i.e. the bug in your programming. And then so on, as you were saying, until we can slowly but surely, and maybe more quickly as we get more practice, come into a place of complete alignment and deep understanding in every molecule of our being of our inherent worth. And then start to do the best thing of all, which is to live an incredibly fulfilling and accomplished life of expressing our gifts and blessings and engaging with life and our passions, which is also good for everybody else, because we're not going to be blaming, judging, and shaming them because we've lost that for ourselves. B, we're modeling that absence of that kind of behavior and what this more productive behavior is, and that causes less suffering. And last but not least, the world needs whatever it is that we have to bring into it. So, and we can only really best do that when we remove all the resistance that's in our way. So yes, it's about becoming resilient, but no, because resilience just means that you're using your resources in the face of friction of the resistance, as opposed to removing that resistance in the first place. You don't need to be resilient if you remove that resistance. Right?
Yeah. And what I've come to see as a result of working on my relationship with shame and improving it, and actually starting to go, wow, this is good. I'm excited at times when I'm experiencing the shame, because, it's helping me fine tune my behavioral response to the experience of, to my principles. And, we always have to check our principles. Just because they're my principles doesn't mean they're correct principles. I still have to work with other people. I can't just go, my principles matter more than anything, I don't care about your rules. That's selfishness, because we have an impact on other people. We have an effect on other people. So the congruence thing is, I need to be aware of the effect I want to have on people. And it doesn't mean I'm always going to please people. Sometimes living into my principles means I'm going to say something that someone's not going to like. And I'll deliver it. My principles say that the delivery of what I have to say requires some structure and some consideration, so that it's not a, blunt object whacking them. It's gentle from my perspective, even if they don't experience as gentle. But I'm doing what I can to live into what I believe is my moral behaviors that match my moral principles. And the other person has to, also live with the information or the input coming in and how they're going to respond to it. Is it going to trigger the shame and the dysfunctional shame responses? Or is it going to cause them to pause and go, okay, thanks for this information. I didn't think about that before. I didn't notice it before. I need to reflect on it. And hopefully they come to a place where they're like, that was uncomfortable. I didn't like hearing it, but I appreciate that you felt safe enough to tell me it. And I disagree with it, but yeah, thanks. And it doesn't destroy our relationship. So these are considerations. We can't just go, I have my principles are the most important thing, and I'm acting in accordance with them. And I don't really
Or
care
my favorite
whether
thing,
you like it.
these are my boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can't be shameless in the way we respond to shame.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
I love it.
We need, if we care about other people, and again, it's not placating and living up to their standards. I have
Nor
standards too.
sacrificing yourself for others, right?
Yeah. But being in relationship with others requires some risk taking. And what I've learned is the more I've been able to take risk, because I'm breaking the authority or the power control that these external authorities have had over me, by starting to take control of how I behave and how my behavior matches my principles, I start to gain confidence, because I can start to predict the response I'm going to receive when I stand up for myself or when I stand up for certain things. And I can live with that. I can deal with that. And so that comes with confidence, and it feeds confidence. And again, I have to always reflect on, did I act out in the right way? Did I stand up in the right way? I'm constantly not questioning myself, but I'm examining myself to make sure that what I'm doing to fine tune my moral behavior matches the moral compass. So that takes a will, it takes a willingness, it takes, an interest in wanting to do that. And I recognize most people don't want to do that. But that's me and how I've developed a sense of confidence in myself that, shame doesn't really get to me the way it used to. I'm working with it. So that's a possibility for everyone who's been wondering, how do I get out of this inner bully that keeps picking on me every time I feel shame, where I attack myself and the voice of the bully, the internalized voice of the bully, keeps attacking me. There is a way out, but it does require some risk taking, some calculated risk taking, and a supportive group of people, or at least a supportive person who could be your coach and cheerleader along the way. So that's I guess an outcome of working with your shame. And then there's the shame 3.
Right. And that leads perfectly into shame 3. But I do want to take a moment and say we had multiple comments. And one of them was, the attacking yourself, which you brought up. And the other was that when I don't meet what I expect of myself, I feel a crappy shame that somebody put in on YouTube. So what you're saying speaks to all of that.
Yeah.
And when we get it right, if I dare say, when we understand and do that work and get to that better place, then we get to shame 3, which is
shame 3 is, so the statement is, I followed my rules and I broke their rules. Okay.
This is where we love to be, right?
Yes. So this is where we want to get into. This is what I mean by the risk taking. So if you've been in a family where there's been a strong, authority, or a very manipulative parent, where your role is to placate this parent and live up to their expectations and be their emotional support, even from childhood. So that's what you've developed, the function you've developed as an adult. And you end up in a multitude of relationships where you're that emotional support person, and you wear their, you're doing the emotional labor, but no one ever does that for you when you need them. So that can happen from our childhood conditioning. So you're going to have a hard time standing up for yourself, because every time you stand up for yourself with a person like that, they're going to make you feel bad and guilty and shame for the feelings they have, because you've tried to align your actions with your values. So you might be a person who's like, okay, I'm no longer going to be the emotional support person to this person, because they don't do it for me, and I need. And whenever I give and give and give to them, I come away feeling drained. So what I've come to realize is this is a very unequal, imbalanced relationship. I don't feel like, I'm getting what I want or need out of it, but they certainly are for me. So what I'm going to do instead is, next time they come to me with their issue, I'm going to try to contain it and say, actually, I'm not in a good headspace right now. Or actually, is it okay if you seek out someone professional or someone else to talk you through this? I'm finding myself feeling pretty drained, or whatever it is. So that's you asserting a boundary in the way you can. Or some people might go, no, I'm not doing this for you anymore, really abruptly, which is like an overcompensation for feeling resentful of having done the emotional support for so long. So either way, you're trying to assert a boundary and change things up, interrupt the dynamic so you're not taken advantage of every time. They're not going to like it, because you are interrupting an established precedent, a dependence, a reliance on you fulfilling a very specific function for them. And when you no longer fulfill that function for them, they feel threatened, they feel disturbed, destabilized, and so they blame you for it. So when you take these risks to stand up for yourself, to interrupt this shame response of, I'm a bad person because I made my parent feel bad because I wasn't doing the emotional labor, you're going to have to resist that feeling of shame, or the narrative of shame associated with the feeling of shame because of how they're feeling. So when we're in these relationships, these codependents, the dominant person, their feelings, their needs trump our own. So in order to come out of this pattern and habit, you have to stand up, you have to take some risks and interrupt it, and then deal with the consequences, which is they're going to shame you, they're going to blame you, they're going to be angry at you, they're going to accuse you of a number of things, and you'd have to wear it for a bit, and then get used to wearing it until it just slides off you and you go, this is not my issue, it's theirs. And you might think, as you're going through this process of coming out of shame 3, and using shame as your ally, which is, I'm living into my principles, and these principles enable me to live a life of autonomy and control, and all the things that I desire. And I'm not hurting anyone. They're just not appreciating what I'm doing. They're not approving of what I'm doing, but I'm not causing harm. I'm trying to be my own person and individuate from this parent who's been controlling me and needing me to be what they want, not allowing me to individuate into who I truly am. So it's going to come with some sacrifice. It's going to come at a cost, and I have to be able to wear it. And the more I can wear it, the greater emotional resilience I develop. And it might, affect the relationship, but it's actually exposing the dysfunction that was always there. And I can start to work with that and create a different relational dynamic with that parent who's been trying to control me, and be alert for the times when I let my guard down and, they try to regroom me back into serving them the way I used to. So I can only do that if I recognize that I've been living into their values, their principles, their needs, and completely neglecting my own. So I have to break their rules in order to follow my rules. And so you're going to feel shame when you've interrupted that behavior pattern, that relational dynamic, in a dysfunctional, codependent, toxic relationship. But what I'm also realizing is that shame is enabling me to take a step towards freedom and a step away from codependence. And it's going to be painful for the first little while, but it's a habit you develop, and then it stops hurting, and you build confidence because you've been taking those risks. And I've seen it happen all around me with people in my life who have had these codependent or abusive relationship with family members, with friends, and the more they've been able to speak up for themselves, and again, they do it in a way that is congruent with their moral principles of kindness and consideration and compassion for themselves, it's been entirely liberating for them, and they've become this completely other person with confidence. And they're not arrogant, they're not narcissistic, they're themselves, have their, more of their ideal selves. And you feel good being around them because they're confident in themselves, and you feel secure. And they're finally secure in themselves, but it required risk. And that's what's required for shame 3. That's my long-winded shame 3 description.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. So we have the 3 shames. I'm going to put them up on the screen again. The first one is I broke their rules and I neither followed nor broke my rules. The second one is I broke my rules to follow their rules. We had a nice conversation about that. And then last but not least, we had I followed my rules and I broke their rules, which is where we get to when we're in that better place after we've done all the work and we go through the process, as you've explained so beautifully, of how we can remove the bugs in our programming and come into better alignment with ourselves and understand our inherent value and worth and lovability that allows us then to bring forth our true selves, which is really what the world needs. Everybody has their own resonance, and we need that resonance. I forget who said it. There's a great quote, I'll have to find it, that says that, God and nature have done everything they can to create all this diversity and individuality and beautiful uniqueness. And then culture tries to push us into this one common mold.
Yeah.
Right. And I love what you were saying, that brought into beautiful articulation how we can keep our individuality with, if I dare say, honor, with love, with conscious awareness of truth and alignment with that truth. So that, as everybody loves to be in flow, is the mother of all frameworks for flow, because everything then flows from there. Because if you don't have that, then the one of the 2 legs that maybe you're standing on, is broken, and the rest of your life is a balancing act, right? With this one other leg, assuming that one is, in perfect condition.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, just agreeing. Love it.
So I love that you did that, and you showed us the transformation that can occur in our lives and within ourselves when we turn shame into an ally, when we understand the truth of the emotion, the frameworks, the processes, and the narratives and hidden scripts. I want to ask you this, and I know we're way over time, and I thank my production team, who's amazing, and I thank you for staying, and everybody who's listening. It doesn't feel like we've been here that long because it is so engrossing and fundamental to us being able to function well, which now I would like to, one last thing, I'm going to squeeze that out, for the sake of all of us, all of humanity right now, as we are living in this world that is topsy-turvy, upside down, war-torn, etc. And we're talking about moral injury, and we're talking about shame, and we're talking about behavior. And we talked about the hierarchy that is initially set up that has us abiding by the behaviors that we exhibit that have us running into shame. In a world that is so precarious right now, and understanding the self-similarity or the analogy or the extension of the parental hierarchy, the family hierarchy, and then taking that out into government I know, right? I went there. I did it. You know me.
Did it.
I have no fear. No fear, no shame. It's been there, done that. Here I am. I'm wearing the hat. Um, so where we want to do the right thing, where we want to be in alignment, where we want to live in truth and love and consideration of self and other, where we see those who we voted for or not, those who we like as children, as babies, we look at the parent as the source of survival. I think many look to their governments, and we saw this in the pandemic in the United States. We're all about democracy in the absence of socialism or communism or anything ism. And yet we wanted the government to support us, to help us, to this, to that. So there is some inherent belief that the systems that are in place that help us govern ourselves as a society and civilization are there to support us, that we require them to survive. And as we are going through this really complex and chronic stress, distress, trauma, and shame, what do you say? And I'm sorry to spring this on you because I came out of nowhere, I'm sure. What do you say? See, I just know how brilliant you are and how embodied all of this is. So when to us, to humanity, who feels ashamed of our humanity, who feels ashamed of how we represent ourselves, who feel ashamed of what we've done to the earth and the environment, who feel ashamed of what we do to each other, who feel ashamed because of racism, who feel ashamed because of division, who feel ashamed, fill in the blanks. How can we take all of this talk about shame and put it square into the truth of our zeitgeist today? What do we do with all that? How do we deal with it? How do we manage that? Where do we go from here? Help us, Dr. Nathalie.
Wow. I'm trying to help myself out with that big question and the reality. So it's what reality are we putting our attention on? Because the world has not only been screwed up today.
That's right.
It's been like this, but for
Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, right?
exactement. So
That's that the French have a saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Exactly. So we are just gotten really much better at seeing the dysfunction and the corruption and the deception, and recognizing that we put our power or energy or what's the word, needs into some surrogate parent to save us and provide for us when we don't need that necessarily, because we could see that these systems have rendered themselves kind of ineffective or untrustworthy. They're not living up to what we've expected of them or what they've claimed to provide for us. So the world as we know it right now is kind of eroding. And this is the Western world. Eastern world has a whole bunch of other things. But the Western civilization and the institutions that have been manifested, I guess, from the foundation of enlightenment or certain thinking, certain authorities, they're not living. It's like they've ceased to fulfill their potential or cease to be useful. So things become obsolete, and that's just a part of life. And so instead of grasping to try to hold on to the things of the past that we now idealize, because this is what we do, we get sentimental about things in the past and we think that was a better time, or let's go back to when governments were like this or that. We tend to do that with even with abusive ex-partners or abusive parents or abusive anyone who's taken advantage of us. When we have some distance, less direct interaction, we tend to become sentimental and nostalgic. So that's a trap. Excuse me. That's a trap. So what do we have? We have ourselves and our own sense of control, our own values and principles, and those around us who, you know, share those same values and principles and priorities, and those that we trust around us. And I think we're being pushed to put our energy and effort into what we can do that has an impact locally in our communities. Because as much as all the stuff going on and around the world, this stuff's being broadcast for us to see, but we're not seeing everything that's going on. And we're especially not seeing all the wonderful things that are going on, that have been going on, and that can be sources of inspiration for us to do our bit in our own lives, in our own communities. So rather than thinking, I need to go and, protest or do this and do that for these very external things, I need to go, all right, is my own house in order? Are my own relationships in order? Are there things within my own local community that I can do to help out? And then I can also potentially do other things out there. But if I make it about fixing everything out there, I'm never going to feel satisfied or that I'm contributing meaningfully, because there's always problems. There's always going to be problems in the world. That's what pushes humanity to want to make a difference, to want to learn things, to want to do better. It's part of our evolution. It's a necessity. That's why we have pain in our life. If we were just comfortable and everything was convenient, as has been happening in Western world, everything is possible and available, we start to get restless. We start to get bored and entitled and demanding, and we start to create and manufacture problems that are not actually problems if you compare it to some of the real problems going on in other parts of the world. So we need to get a grip and start to look at, how do I get my house in order? How do I deal with my shame instead of the secondhand embarrassment for humanity? That's not going to help, because there's also great things that humanity is doing and continues to do. And that's what I need to also look at and think about how I might use my resourcefulness and the resourcefulness in my community to start to address some of the problems. But I can't do that if I'm always looking for a savior, an external authority, a government, a group to do these things for me. And my affiliation with that group will make me feel good and morally righteous. It doesn't work that way. We've got to put effort. Our action is what? And our direct action that provides an impact that we can see, that we can go, yes, there's evidence of my work. And that's going to inspire me to do more and better, because that's what's meaningful for me, because that's what helps me feel connected. It's hard to feel connected to stuff going on out there if you don't have a relationship with those communities and those populations. But we can feel like we have to do something because societal external expectation tell us that we're a good person if we do that thing, and it signals to the world that we care. Sure.
Yeah,
But
and that's the
is
thing
it providing an impact that's actually meaningful for those people, that's actually going to produce beneficial change? How do we know?
well, some people feel that the protest for whatever the cause is, whether it's from abortion to the war in the Middle East, if I don't do something, then I am complicit in creating harm to others. And there's a shame in that.
Yeah.
So there's a shame in there are some people who are like, I can't watch this every day, but if I don't, then I've let it go. I've gone silent. There's a shame in I haven't done enough. There's a shame in I'm exhausted. I'm traumatized. That's a conversation we're going to have next week. There are different levels of this shame. Of what you said, I think is 100% true. And I love that you said that, because if everything starts from the inside out, whether we're going internally for ourselves or moving out into the larger and larger and larger groups, spheres, societies, communities, etc. But it always starts at the seed. Everything starts with a seed first. So if you don't care for that seed and you don't nurture that, and everything that comes out from that, this is why I think that improving each individual life is so important, because you can't create a world in which all can thrive when the elements in that world are a hot mess.
Well, we're each a
I love that
world.
you said that, but there's also, sorry?
We're each a world. Each of us are
Absolutely.
our own world.
Absolutely.
So you want to fix the world, heal the world. You got to work on your own world.
Heal
And
that world
that's,
first. Yeah.
yeah.
So then from there, I agree with everything you said. I love everything you said, but I wonder for those who say, but I have a responsibility based on my morals to assist when something has gone really wrong in the world.
I agree with that. And yes, it's important. And if protesting is part of what, people find value and meaningful and feel like it has an impact or whatever, even if it doesn't, that's what they do. The thing that people don't ask themselves, and I think they need to take the time, because what we've been talking about is all three shames in this, what's going on in the world. I feel social pressure to stand up because some rules tell me that if I don't do anything, I'm complicit. I have to take a step back and go, actually, am I complicit? Don't tell me that I'm complicit because I don't follow a certain set of standards that I didn't develop myself. I need to actually work out what am I actually complicit in, if anything at all. So that's shame one. I'm doing things because there's an external expectation of how I should behave because I have privilege, for example. Then there's a shame two, where I'm at risk of moral injury because of all this stuff going on and I'm feeling powerless and I'm not doing anything and I need to do something. And then there's a shame three, where I have to take some risk to stand up for what I believe is right. So this is, beautiful in the way it's been encapsulated. The problem with all of this that we're not spending enough time considering is, if I do these things that I think are right, there are unintended consequences. And those unintended consequences can lead to harm. So in my effort to live into what I think is going to produce a justice, I can actually be promoting injustice. I might be sustaining a problem because the information that I'm using, that I'm working with to inform my beliefs and therefore my behaviors, is biased, is incomplete, is emotionally driven. I'm not using an objective or a proper way of evaluating. So that's something to think about. Are my actions potentially harmful? And how will I know if I'm impacting positively or negatively? What's the evidence that I need to conclusively know that my actions are producing the desired impact? Therefore, aligning my actions, or my actions are therefore congruent with my moral principles. And that's, I think, a question not enough people are asking themselves, because we're so emotionally heightened and we're reactive, because the stuff is out in our faces all the time because we're looking at it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You're frozen, I believe. Maybe you want to close your video and turn it back on again. But I love everything you've said, and it makes perfect sense. We very much appreciate your time. There you go, Dr. Nathalie.
I was here.
You are here. We very much appreciate your time. I appreciate the production team who's been with us for so long, and everybody who's listening. Thank you so much. This has been extraordinary. And of course, there's so much more to discuss. But for now, we might have to cut it short. I do want to ask the question we always ask at the end of every show, which is the get off the couch moment. If you were going to, and you know this because we did this the last time, if you were going to give a piece of advice to our listeners, our viewers, about what they need to do, what they could do, what would be available for them to do right now to help them to transform shame from an enemy to an ally, what would you say would be the best thing to do, the get off the couch right now, today, to do to help yourself with the personal growth, with the increased confidence, with the ally versus an enemy, to create that better life, that stronger life, that greater alignment with self? What would you say?
Okay. So I would ask everyone to work out, discover, analyze, examine, who are the authorities in your life? Who are you placing in enough value on? So whose opinions, rules, regulations, values, principles, ideas, who are they in your life, whether they're close to you or they're figures, public figures, that you believe know better than you about what's your right and wrong. So work out who those authorities are, because that will be your first step into recognizing your tendency to live into external values instead of your own values. So that's the homework for everyone to do. Work out who are your external authorities and discover what are the things that you're believing and living into that may not align with your own principles and the practices that you've been implementing.
That is excellent. Thank you so much for helping us with that. So, okay, you guys, you have your marching orders. If that get off the couch moment, if you do this, you will be well on your way to turning shame from an enemy to an ally. If you would like more information on our topic here, then we have a banner up on the screen. This is Dr. Nathalie Martinek's article on Substack. Shame is your ally, not your enemy. And you can read this and learn much more and solidify what you've heard. If you can subscribe for free to her Substack. But if you'd like to know more about this, then I would recommend that you do the paid subscription, which is probably the best investment you've ever made. It's absolutely fantastic. We appreciate so much that you came back and you joined us, Dr. Nell. You're frozen, but it's such a beautiful picture. What would you say to people who would like to get in touch with you? How can they best get in touch with you?
Come on Substack and send me a message, or you can visit my website and send me a message through email.
And what is your website?
drnathaliemartinek.com.
Okay, Dr. Nathalie, I'm writing it here so I can put it up. I hope I did it right.
Let's see.
Oh, you put it in chat? Well, I'm doing the banner. Let's see.
Beautiful.
Is that it? Did I do it
Don't
right?
forget the H. Yes, don't forget the H in Nathalie. And
do.
So my name, and you can find me there and contact me through there or Substack.
It's up on the screen. Yeah, if you want to get in touch with her. You're also on Instagram and you're on X. I was about to say Twitter. You're on X, but really drnataliemartinek.com or on her Substack would be the best ways to get in touch with Dr. Nathalie. I am Dr. Reshna Kashmin. You can contact me at accesstothepath.com. Drop in an email. We are so grateful to you, Dr. Nathalie, again for joining us and for helping us to understand how to manage shame well and what to do with it. Next week, we continue our mental health series with Echoes of Unrest, Trauma in Turbulent Times with Nidhi Tiwari. Super excited for that show. Can't wait.
She's amazing.
She is. I'm very fortunate to know these powerful, brilliant ladies who just are out there helping to make the world a better place and helping us all heal. Thank you so much again for all of you who have joined us live, for all of you who are listening afterwards. I wish you a beautiful, amazing life where you know your value, your self-worth, your inherent right to exist and to be loved. Namaste.
Namaste.
See you next week.